What's one of the best things players can do to improve their rating? I think it's to become a more aggressive player and play for the initiative. So we're going to start a new series called Attack Like Mikhail Tal. We're going to go through some of Tal's games, starting with age 12. So this game was played in Riga, 1949, and his opponent is Joseph Zilber. Tal's playing the white pieces. So we see e4, e6, d4, d5, French defense. And note that Tal is playing e4 right from a young age. E4 tends to be a little bit more aggressive than d4 on the first move. We see a Tarrasch variation, c5. This is all standard. Takes, takes, knight f3, bishop c4. And look what Tal's already doing. 3 minor pieces out to 1 for black. So 3 to 1. Keep this in mind. Tal always likes to keep playing for the initiative, keep developing his pieces. D takes c, bishop takes. He pretty much had to do that because the pawn was about to be captured on d4. And now we see knight to e4, hitting the bishop, and it's also kind of eyeing these dark squares in the black camp. Like, see how the queen cuts in here? The knight's eyeing d6. So this is a little bit loose. The queen's a little bit loose out there on h5, right? You can already feel that Tal has this initiative. Stockfish eval is around 0.3 or 0.4 for white. So Stockfish feels it too. Knight to e7 by black. Already, this is a mistake by black. Things are hanging on by a thread. So we already mentioned this bishop being attacked, only defended by the queen. If we're able to deflect the queen, then we could maybe win the bishop. So on this move, a really strong idea here would be to play g4 right away. It looks odd, putting that pawn out there where it can easily be captured. But after queen takes g4, we can play queen to e2, now threatening to win the bishop. And if black tries to save this bishop, let's say pawn to b6, so guarding the bishop and the bishop guards here. Now we have rook to g1, hitting the queen, also eyeing this pawn on g7. So if the queen moves, let's say queen h3, now we have rook takes g7, and this is already a huge advantage for white. White has a big attack coming. And the black queen is having trouble getting back. The king's stuck on e8. We'll probably castle queenside. So already, move 9, nice big advantage for Tal. He plays bishop to g5. It's also a strong move. Queen to g4. Attacking this knight on e4. And look at how Tal responds to this. Queen to d3. He's okay with losing the g2 pawn. He's castling queenside. And we can see now all of these pieces for white are active. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces out in the open. Very active. And there's still this issue with the bishop on c5 hanging for black. So he plays b6. Now Tal queenside castles. Pawn to h3 would be another good move here. That queen is pretty low on squares. Kingside castle for black. Now at this point, this is one of the critical points in the game. Tal has a huge advantage here. And the move he should play is pawn to h3. And the problem is this queen only has 1, 2, 3 possible options where she doesn't immediately get captured. If she goes to f5 or h5, then white has pawn to g4. Now the queen only has one option, queen back to g6, and knight to h4. Boom, the queen is trapped. You could try some tactics, like maybe start with knight e5. It doesn't help. This queen will have to sacrifice for a minor piece. So the queen's going to be trapped there. I don't know why Tal missed h3, but I think it has something to do with how much he likes to attack. This is a case where you have to realize as white, I have the advantage and it's okay to play low risk and look for the finishing tactics, right? So he's played very aggressive so far, played for the initiative, but sometimes you have to rein it in a little bit and say, okay, now I got that advantage. I can slow down a little bit and play for conversion mode. And I talked about this in an earlier video, like the ChessGoals risk reward method of thinking. Video was called Think Like a Master, right? We have the eval, then we have the pressure of our opponent making a mistake that can pull that eval up. And then we have the risk of us making a mistake that can pull that eval down. So the move that Tal plays here is actually high risk for himself. He plays bishop to f6. It's super creative, but it's actually just a blunder. It's a huge blunder. What he was hoping for was g takes f and knight takes f6 with this nice king and queen fork. Black did not fall for that, found the correct move, queen to h4, And after the king moves, now he's able to take. This is just winning for black. So that's something we can learn from Tal, right? He did a great job building that advantage, playing for the initiative, getting all the pieces active. You have to be able to switch gears and say, okay, now I have that advantage. Where's the solid move? And look for concrete solutions, not necessarily just always pushing the pieces forward. And that's what H3 would have been. So now Tal has to figure out, how do I fight back? And to his credit, he finds a lot of aggressive, creative moves. So watch what he does here. Almost every single move has an immediate threat. And you don't have to create a one move threat every single time. But really, if you can keep the opponent trying to play defensive and react to all of your moves, that's how you can fight back in these losing positions. So he plays G3. Simple threat, attacking the queen. The queen doesn't have a lot of squares, and she has to make a big decision which direction to go. So here you could easily see maybe an opponent playing queen to c7, but then there's knight takes f6 check. So his opponent did find the only move, queen h6. So Tal put his opponent in an only move situation. Now he plays g4. Not of an immediate one move threat, but g5 is a pretty big threat because a rook is coming to the g file, lining up with the black king. Now his opponent plays queen to f4. Small mistake. Afraid of this g5 move, forking the queen and the pawn on f6, because that's going to open up the black king. Now Tal pushes ahead, g5, strongest move. And here it gives the opponent a tough question. Do we take? Do we push? Do we ignore? His opponent decides to take, which I think is an okay option. But what it does is it opens up the G file. So now kind of thinking back to that risk reward model, the potential reward is high for Tal. And the potential risk is actually now low, I would say, because his king is nice and safe. None of the pieces are really targeted, right? Everything seems safe. So it's an eval advantage for black, but it's only -2. And black is up 3 points of material. So white has some compensation for that 3 points of material. He already has 2 points of comp according to the engine. And the practical compensation is even higher because look at the black king. This is a high risk scenario for black. Knight to g6 was played. Now pawn to h4 by Tal. Another great move because it's just threatening h5, putting that pressure on the opponent right away. A good practical choice. Knight to b4 played. Queen to h3 by Tal. So bringing the queen over to the king side, getting closer to this king. e5, discovered attack. Queen to g2, lining up with the king. Bishop f5, and this is a mistake by black. All of a sudden, Tal has the advantage. So his opponent finally cracked. Here you almost have to play king to h8, but even that's not very fun for black because knight takes f7 check is coming. So this move, now white has the advantage. Pawn to h5 is correct, hitting the knight. The knight can't move out of the way. Let's say knight to e7, for example. This is not going to be good. After knight takes f7 check, there's no good way to block the check. Bishop to g4, for example, you have to watch this f6 square. Like knight to f6 check could be played immediately. Stockfish is saying even stronger, rook h4, pinning the bishop to the queen. This is completely over. White is winning. h5, king to g7 played. Now h takes g6. Huge advantage for Tal. h6, bishop takes f7. And what's happening in a couple moves is Tal sets up a beautiful checkmate combination. G takes f, h takes g. So if we do a count of the material, right now we're equal. It's an imbalance. We have a rook for white. We have 2 minor pieces for black, and an extra pawn for white. So it's 5 plus 1 versus 3 plus 3. But the king is out in the middle. G pawn's about to be captured. There's a passed f pawn. And knight takes g5 is the start of the tactics. After queen takes f2, trying to win a pawn back, this is a forced checkmate in 8 moves, and Tal finds it. This is brilliant. If you want to try to find it, go ahead and pause the video. It's not very easy to find, but we'll show you the continuation. Knight to e6 check. King takes f7. Queen to g7 check, allowing the capture of the knight. Anytime you can get a major piece behind your opponent's king and start to bring that king towards you, it makes it a lot easier to put that king into a mating net, right? So Tal's walking that king down towards his own side of the board. Rook to h6 check. Bishop has to sacrifice. Now you could play rook takes g6 here. That's a mate in 6. Tal plays queen takes g6. It's going to be a mate in 5. King e7. Rook h7 check. This is kind of the simple, like, beginner ladder checkmate, queen, rook, queen, rook, queen, rook. But here there's no queen to g8 check. So Tal has to insert queen to g7. And after king to e8, he forces the king over to f8 and finishes with rook to h8 checkmate. So this is game 1, attack like Tal. I'm going to do more of these games so that we can help you play more aggressively and incorporate that into your game. Thanks for watching.